Next, we have application security. Application security means here they are talking about integrating application with Azure Active Directory. They are talking about securing those applications. So first we'll be talking about identity protection. Then we'll talk about AD application scenarios, app registration, graph permissions, and manage identities and certificates. There would be a few more topics we'll discuss. So let's first have a look on identity platform. Okay, before we jump into the presentation, think about it. When you go with your any application, let's say you are using any application, you may have seen once you try to access the application, you get a prompt to sign in. Sometimes the prompt is coming from Microsoft. Maybe the prompt is from Google. Maybe the prompt is for any other account. Maybe you are allowed to use any account, Gmail account, Google account, Hotmail account, Facebook account. That means it could be any type of application where you have different type of identity platform. Some applications have Microsoft account to complete the authentications, work account, school account. If it belongs to your organization, then you may have to use your Azure AD account, your personal account, that is called D2C. So we are talking about authentication to your application. Write the code once and authenticate any identity to your application. Now this is called Microsoft Identity Platform. So whenever you want that your application needs to be integrated to your identity, the first thing is you have to go with the app registration. Registration is must. You have to register your application with Azure Active Directory, and this is how later we have the client SDK called Authentication Library, MSAL, and then we blend it into the identity platform, where you can define that what type of target we have. But do remember, it's quite simple and straightforward option. You have to use the portal to register and configure your application. We are talking about registration process. Let's have a look on this diagram. This diagram will give you much more information, insights about application process. Now, the first thing is, when it comes to application, the first thing which comes in your mind is what application, what type of application you have. Do you have a single page application? Do you have a web application? Do you have a web API applications? You have any mobile application, Android applications, desktop application? Whatever it is, whatever kind of application it is, take a look on the first step. You have to first register the application, register the app, register the app, register, register, register. That means doesn't matter whichever kind of application it is, it needs to be registered first of all. And where we are talking about the registration, we are talking about the registration with Azure AD. Let me show you this on the portal. If you go for your Azure portal and in Azure Active Directory, here we have the off service called Azure AD. This is my directory service, and in this directory service, we have the option called app registration. Here you will see the registration for your services. So click on new registration. And there you can register any application with your Azure Active Directory. Provide the user-facing display name for your applications. Then you have to define that this application is going to support for one tenant, multi-tenant, using personal account, Microsoft account, or personal Microsoft account. So it may be possible your application belongs to two different tenants. You can go with a multi-tenant. Maybe it only belongs to your company, your office environment. And then you have to provide a redirection URL. That means we'll return the authentication response to Which particular platform? So you provide the platform, maybe it's a web application, you provide the redirection path over there. So it can be changed later. This is optional over here. We can define that later as well. That's how we do the registration. So it doesn't matter from where your application is coming. Maybe it's your on-premises application. Still, you can register your application in Azure AD. Maybe it's a SaaS application. Still, you can register your application with Azure AD. SaaS application, IaaS application. You can register any sort of application to Azure AD. This is the one which I have shown you on the portal, app registration. Any application that outsources authentication to Azure AD must be registered in a directory. That means registration is must. Then it generates token information that include the application ID. Now let me show you these things on the portal once again. What is app ID? The moment you complete the registration, for example, you see these are my applications which I have created earlier for my previous classes. So if I go for this any application called test app 45 HCL, in this case, this application will generate one app ID over here. You see this app ID? This is called client ID that gets generated. Along with that, there would be some secrets which will get generated as well. So if you want to see them, open your application. And this is the app ID right here. This is a token that has been generated for each application. And for this particular ID, there would be a secret as well. Authentication purpose. So we have to take care of the secret as well. You see the secret is there. I have to protect the secret. It's like a credential of your application. That means along with the application registration, you have to take care of the app ID and the secrets. But we don't want to manage any type of secrets for your application because there we have to define more security. We have to keep it in a safe place. So that's why Microsoft announced another service called Microsoft Managed Identity. Managed Identity means it's a token-based authentication system. There would be no code. There would be no need of sharing the credentials. There would be no credentials get generated. It's an identity which uses Azure AD authentications to authenticate the services. So one difference is when you register your application, you get a token and you get a password along with that. In Managed Identity, you get an app ID, but there would be no password for that. That would be something taken care by Microsoft. And that's what we were looking for. We don't want to see any code. We don't want to update, you can say, any credential in terms of code with the applications. There would be no headache of sharing or managing the credential at all. So in this case, in terms of managed identity, first you need to understand that there would be two things you have to understand. One is called source. Other is called destination. Source means your VM, your applications, your AKS, where you are hosting your application. And destination could be your storage account, your database, your key vault. That could be the application. That could be the destination. And that needs to be supported Azure AD authentication. Because managed identity can only work with few sources and few destinations. That's why I'm highlighting these things in front of you. For example, it's my VM. The example which we are looking for is maybe I'm using source as a VM. It's my VM right here. Using this VM, I would like to access my storage. Let's say storage is the target resource for me, storage account. It could be a key vault, it could be a database, it could be a storage account. Let's say it's a storage account. So here we use two things. We use the concept of authentication and authentication. You need to manage identity for your VM. Once you initiate the manage identity, there would be the new service principal get generated in the AD, and that get updated with the INDS. This is called Azure Instance Metadata Service. After that, that means the service have been now integrated. You see the service principal? The service principal is now be a part of the tenant. It's integrated to the tenant. That means now this is about authentication. Authentication is taken care by Azure AD. But further for authorization purpose, we are using RBAC over here. RBAC will take care of authorization. So this is what we have in this manage identity. It's about authentication and RBAC. So only few services are there where you can enable manage identity, and then you can link to the other services. The agenda is there would be no code in the application, no credential in the application. I'll show you this with the app service example. We have app service. App service means setting up the web application on cloud. I can set up my Java application, .NET framework, Node.js, PHP, Python, 2D, Go. These are the different, you can say, frameworks which we can use in cloud to set up the application. The first thing we have is to create the application service on the cloud. You need to create an environment that is called app service environment. Environment means a dedicated environment where you are going to host your application. So AST is a single tenant deployment for Azure App Service that runs in your virtual network. It's a dedicated environment. When I say dedicated, it is getting linked to your VNet, completely private to your environment. Network isolated application housing. There you can have your internal applications, you can have your multi-tier applications, you can have your multiple applications over there in one environment. And the good point is, it's a single tenant system to satisfy internal compliance or security requirements. Sometimes your company do not want to create the application, you can say, they want to create the application on a secure network, a private network. So for them, EAC app service environment would be the good choice. This is called an isolated environment. But how can I get started with it? To get started with ASC app service environment, we have to first create plan. This is called app service plan. App service plan defines a set of compute resource for web application to run. So let me first tell you, let's take an example over here to understand. For example, I'm talking about I'm looking for a VM. So when you create a virtual machine, it's an infrastructure service. You define a size, you define the operating system, you define the computing power to your VM. Same goes for app service plan. When you want to create your application, when you create your web application, how much compute power it needs, how many resources it need to create your application. So app service plan means set of compute resource required for your web application to run. It's like an underlying infrastructure which you need to run your application. It's like a platform which you need on the top of it, you'll post your web application. So for example, you have one app service plan. In that plan, you can have 2, 3 web application, multiple applications. So that depends on the plan, that how strong your plan is, how strong your foundation is. So you have to define your system requirement. You have to let Microsoft know that what type of compute plan do you need for your web application. It's like a PaaS offering. It's a platform as a service plan. So first you will define that do you want a Windows plan or do you want a Linux plan? Then you will define in which location you want to host it. Then you will define how many VM do you want on the background. Because this time you are not setting up the VM individually, it's a PaaS offering. VM is an infrastructure service. So we will just let Microsoft know that how many VMs do we need further to host my plan, to host my VM further. And for individual VM instance, how much size will be there? Small VM, medium VM, large instances. What kind of instance do we need? So when you get started the plan, you have to choose the pricing tier, and there is free, standard, shared, basic, standard, premium, T2, T3, isolated V2. These are the pricing tier for app service plan. This is very, very important, I should say, because if you don't know about the plan, you won't understand that what type of features you'll be getting for your application. So before you start creating your application, you have to understand the plan, the pricing, the features, availability, and obviously the cost. So if you are saying that you are creating the application for testing purpose, you'll be going with a free plan, shared plan. What if your company is saying that you want a dedicated plan, separate plan with higher feature, then you have to go with the standard, premium, premium V2, premium V3. Maybe backup is required, maybe auto scaling is required for your application, maybe security is required, certificate is required, custom domain is required. As you are talking about more and more feature, you have to go with a higher plan in that. Next is called app service environment networking. So when you set up your app service environment to create your application, for that plan, what type of network do you need? Have a look on this statement. It says ASC will run your application in your network. As it is lying in my network, definitely I have to define, I will get the control on the network as well. So I'll define that in which subnet I'll be keeping my application. What would be the domain suffix? This is like the domain suffix look like Azure App Service Environment.net. What would be the public IP, virtual IP of my environment? What would be the inbound address, outbound address, default outbound address? That's a part of app service environment. So it's a dedicated plan. That's why we have this advanced control over here to manage the app service environment. Networking controls are there. Along with that, there would be one more thing. Another benefit is there. These are the features of app service environment. Zone, high availability. It also support availability zone support. Redundancy. This architect is called zone redundant environment. That means your app service is going to deploy across zones, availability zones. If you recall, day one or day two. Day one, I told you about the physical hierarchy, and I said in the physical hierarchy we have regions, we have geography, then regions, then zone, and then data center. For example, I'm talking about East US. When I deploy the application, I'll get the option to choose the right region, and I'll choose East US, for example. So when I want to deploy the application in East US, if I want to make it highly available, if I want to get the zone redundancy, then we deploy the application across the zone ones. And zone redundant means then you are going to choose the instance of your application by yourself. Where do you want to deploy your application? Maybe I want to keep, let's say, my app instance in zone 1, other app instance in zone 2, other app instance in zone 3. So I'm doing it manually. So these zones are nothing but that means we are talking about multiple data centers and all these zones are connected. These zones are connected through dedicated regional low latency network. Tolerance to failure is achieved because of redundancy and logical isolation of Azure service. All these zones are connected. If something went wrong with any of the zones, other zones will help you out to bring your application. So that ensures resiliency. Minimum 3 zones are there in any zone enabled region. Like I gave you the example of East US, because I know in East US we have zones. First, you need to understand which region supports zone facility, because this is not applicable to all the regions. It is applicable to few regions only. So cross-check that what locations support the zonal capability. Then you'll be getting this availability zone support over there. Next is called App Service Environment. App Service Environment certificates. This is the isolated environment for application. Now your application may need some certificates. So how you are going to use the certificates? You can create your certificates with the App Service Environment Certificate Service. You can buy the certificates from your key vault. You can import the certificate from your key vault. Maybe you do have your private certificates. Maybe you have your CA certificate authorities are there. You want to grab the certificate from there. Easy Cert or Global Sign. They provide you the certificates. These are the integrated CA, and you can upload the certificates, get the certificate using those accounts.